Well, my name's Blake Cummings. I currently live in Maud, which is a little town in Seminole County, Oklahoma. I grew up in eastern Oklahoma, where my dad was a school superintendent. My mother was a member of the Choctaw Nation Housing Authority Board, so we're Choctaw in my family on my mother's side. I went to high school there in Kenta and went to the University of Oklahoma. I have a degree in petroleum land management. And I've spent most of the last 30 years in the oil and gas industry. I've worked in many different facets of the industry. Primarily, I do land and title now, but back in the 80s, after I got out of college, we were drilling coal bed methane gas wells in Oklahoma. We drilled the first coal bed methane wells in eastern Oklahoma, actually. And when I was 26, I helped my high school over Christmas break drill their own gas well so that they could have a gas supply, and it helped take 35% of the expenses out of their general fund that they were spending on utilities. We were able to drill the well very cheaply, and for 25 years the school had free gas. And today that well's still in use, but it's been sold to the local city gas company, but they give the school a deep discount. And we were very happy to do that because the money opened up and allowed the school to have money for assistants and teachers and books and everything else. So,
why are you running for corporation?
Well, I'm running for Corporation Commission because obviously, well, actually not obviously, a lot of people don't know what the Corporation Commission does. So let me just say quickly, they have oversight over many industries' operations in the state of Oklahoma, but primarily two industries. The oil and gas industry, where they have regulatory oversight, and in the public utilities, your electric companies, your natural gas, even telecommunications. And they, as a matter of fact, whenever there's a rate increase in a utility in Oklahoma, the Corporation Commission has to approve it. So they also handle trucking industry, safety regulations, the fuel tanks that are at gas stations. They have regulatory control over those and over the fuel pumps and over a lot of different things. But I'm in the Corporation Commission race because I want to apply what I know in the industry, which is 30 years of experience, but I want to do it from the perspective as a Democrat who's lived in this state all his life, that we're making decisions in the Corporation Commission not on behalf of 3.9 million people, but more and more on behalf of a handful of very rich, very wealthy CEOs of major companies. And I think we've gotten off track, and that's reflected in the operations of state government today. So many things are happening that are being decided not by the people, but by a handful of wealthy elite. And my knowledge is in the oil and gas industry, so I want to be in the Corporation Commission and start working for the people there.
Is it fair to ask you to present both sides? If a Republican is elected, what should we expect versus what we will see if a Democrat like yourself is elected?
Okay. Well, a Republican has been elected. There are three officers in the Corporation Commission. We've been all Republican in that organization since 2008. When Dana Murphy was elected, it's been all Republican ever since. As a matter of fact, we haven't elected a Democrat since 1992 in the Corporation Commission. What we've seen with Republicans in office here, and I'm not speaking about all Republicans, I'm just talking about just specifically in the Corporation Commission. The candidates that come in to the Corporation Commission tend to have been selected or vetted by the leaders of some of the major companies. And then those leaders help fund these Republican candidates' campaigns to the point where a Democrat really can't compete financially in these elections. And then these people are put in office, and they take an oath of office to be a corporation commissioner, and their job at that point is to regulate the very people who helped put them in office. And that is just too narrow of an obligation to want to do things that a handful, maybe 4 or 5 people want to have done. The difference between that and a Democrat being in office is Democrats tend to look things as what's best for the people of the state of Oklahoma. That's where you see the introductions of social programs, things of that sort, anything that's going to help people as a whole. It's not that Republicans don't back those programs. Republicans for years and years were a buffer against Democrats who want to introduce a social program, but it may cost a fortune. And a Republican would always come in and say, wait, let's try to cut spending, let's try to cut waste, et cetera, et cetera. The problem with Republican control is that for the last 8 years especially, and even going farther back than that, but for the last 8 years, we have seen cutting waste, lowering taxes, cutting revenue to the state of Oklahoma to the point where there's really no real waste left. But we've also cut needed services, things that we have to have. Education especially has been cut to the point where we're not really competitive with even the surrounding states, much less the 50 states across the USA. And that is what this year is going to be for Democrats, to have the voice to say that, look, we've gone too far. We need to help people. We need to make sure our children are getting the education they need. We need to make sure we have health care available for the elderly. And while these are outside the purview of the Corporation Commission, it's all part of the same thing. There's been a move away from people running state government to a small number of wealthy individuals running state government.
Where do you stand on gross production tax, both for traditional oil wells and the petroleum industry, but the wind farms?
Yeah, the gross production tax, as you may know, was 7% for decades. All the time I was growing up, it was 7%. When I first was in the industry, it's 7%. Every well I participated in, or operated, or drilled, we paid 7% gross production, and never gave it another thought. It was kind of like a salesman earning a commission. You're taking resources out from under the state. 7% goes back to the state for services. Then all of a sudden we go to the point where somebody thought it was a good idea to drop it to 2%. Not gradually drop it to 2%, all at once, 7 to 2%. And we saw what happened over the first couple of years of that. Revenue dropped in this state. Now, I'm advocating restoring it fully back to 7%. The move to 5% this year to help education is a solid move and a great move, and I was honestly didn't feel that the legislature would ever do that, but I think when the businessmen at the first of the year introduced a proposal to get it up, and then the teacher walkout, they felt like they had to do something because all of a sudden everybody else is doing their job for them. So, but the move back to 7%, and it shouldn't be considered a tax increase. It should be considered a restoration of a previous tax. Now on wind and solar, I am a big proponent of alternative energy. I know I've been in the oil and gas industry all my life, but as I heard someone say a long time ago, that after the last oil is gone and the last gas is taken, the wind's still going to blow and the sun's still going to shine. So we need to be utilizing that in energy. I propose that Oklahoma quit thinking of themselves as an oil and gas state, but as an energy state, because we have the technology. We have ConocoPhillips is doing research beyond oil and gas. Our universities are doing research beyond oil and gas. Wind and solar investments, the wind catcher programs, up here in northwest Oklahoma. But I think what we have to do, to be fair about it, we have to treat wind and solar on a level playing field with oil and gas. The incentives that oil and gas has available, wind and solar should have available. The production taxes that are paid by oil and gas should also be paid by wind and solar based on the energy output that they produce. And if we treat them equally, then they will grow equally, and technology will be created that's going to make all of these more cost efficient and more affordable to everyone. And that's what I want for us here, is as energy state designation, and to remember we've had a great history with oil and gas. The last millennium, this century, we need to be an energy state.
Ratepayers, utility rates. How does Oklahoma compare, well, I pay for electricity and natural gas, to our surrounding states?
Okay. Well, more often than not, it's competitive because one of the things they look at is the cost. Now, there are other states and us can have things regarding taxes that are added on, base fees and everything. Of course, you know, in this state, since we can't raise taxes easily, you always have these fees popping up associated with utility rates. My take on that is, and this is where I talk about being a Democrat looking out for people. If they come to the Corporation Commission and Public Service or ONG or whoever wants to have a rate increase, I want to look at several things. First and foremost, like you said, how does their rate here compare to the surrounding states? Public Service, for instance, is a subsidiary of American Electric Power. They operate in several states across the country. I want to know what their rate schedule is in those states. If we're paying more than the rest of them, don't come asking for a rate increase. If our people are if we're having a recession like we've had over the years in Oklahoma, and our people have less spendable income this year than last, don't come asking for a rate increase. If our people are having to suffer through and tighten their belts, the utility companies who are invested in Oklahoma and who are making money off of Oklahomans need to tighten their belts with us. If you're paying your CEO $30 million bonus at the end of the year for working great deals with the states, you need to check your budget over and quit asking us to pay for all that stuff. There's so many things to look at, and I don't think we hear about those as much as we used to. I think when we have a Democrat in the commission, even if there's still 2 Republicans and a Democrat, I think you'll start seeing real transparency, because things that 3 members of one party won't talk about, whether the Republican or Democrat, will get talked about if you have somebody from the other party. 47% of registered voters in Oklahoma are not Republicans, but all 3 positions in the Corporation Commission are Republican, and we got to change that this year.
Probably the final question I want to address is earthquakes. That's a popular topic, and I think the Corporation Commission has a lot of influence on whether they happen or not.
Yes.
What's your opinion on that?
Well, you know, the first few years, I lived down in Seminole County when we had the Prague earthquake in 2011. I actually still lived in Pauls Valley at the time. And when that happened, I thought a train had derailed. And I was a good hour and a half drive away from where this earthquake took place. And if you remember, for many months after that, and actually a couple of years, oil companies, the Corporation Commission, everyone was denying that there was any correlation between these earthquakes and the injection wells or any type of drilling activity. Well, time and facts and information have shown that there is a correlation. As a matter of fact, around 90% or better of the earthquakes that are felt in Oklahoma now are related to injection wells. Northern Oklahoma, you guys especially, are feeling that. I worked in Pratt, Kansas a few years ago. We were already having the earthquakes down here. They started having them up there. Their commission was saying the same thing. Well, we still don't have a correlation. Oh, come on. Of course there was. And now it's a given. I have a plan for the earthquakes, and I'm glad we have an opportunity to mention it here tonight. And I wish our insurance commissioner candidate was here, Kimberly Fobbs, because she and I have talked about this, because this would be a joint venture between the OCC and the insurance commission. But if you think about it, Oklahomans now are buying insurance riders to cover damage from earthquakes caused by an industry. Everybody used to have maybe buy earthquake insurance because of the possibility the New Madrid Fault might take off at the Mississippi River and shake us up and cause damage. That's a very small chance in a lifetime, but you also had a very small premium to go with it. Well, now you have rising premiums because actuaries in the insurance industry have to allow for the fact that there could be damage caused by the oil and gas industry and the injection wells. So your premium goes up. If you buy an earthquake rider, if they still have it available, and some insurance companies aren't making it available, then it's going to go up. And you're going to have a high deductible. If you got a $1,000 deductible and your chimney starts breaking apart and it's going to cost $1,100 to fix, guess what? You're going to get a $100 check from the insurance company and you got to pay the rest. Here's my plan. In the oil and gas industry, there's always been for years and years what we call a plugging bond. So if you drill a well in Oklahoma, you have to put up a bond that's usually worth about $30,000, $35,000. And what that means is if you drill a well and then you skip town, go bankrupt, whatever, the commission will have access to that funds to plug your well with, to make it safe again, end it, and everything's done, everything's fine. I'm proposing a seismic bond. Anybody with an injection well, existing or new, needs to put up a bond, and the amount can be determined. I'm sure it'll be determined by the legislature, and they'll argue back and forth. But put a bond up, and in the areas where there's intense activity, you have a higher bond. In some areas in southern Oklahoma where there's no earthquake activity, you may have very little, maybe zero, who knows. But we need to use those bonds to create a fund so that if a company uses their injection well and to excess and pumps way too much fluids at way too high pressure and causes an earthquake and there's damage to a home, instead of you paying big premiums every month and having a high deductible, you make a claim through the OCC to that fund and you get paid the entire cost of your repair from that fund. That does two things. One is it keeps the property owner from having to pay a high premium. That responsibility is off the insurance company now, and it's off the property owner now. That responsibility now is part of this fund and the people who fund it. The other part of it is, with the industry having to worry about whether they're going to have to pay a bunch for a 5.0 earthquake, they're going to self-regulate and find ways, okay, we got to keep these earthquakes to a minimum. We got to keep them below a certain level or we're going to get busted for this. And I think it's a win for the industry because it shows people of Oklahoma the industry's behind this and they want to make sure they're not causing any more damage. And it's a win for the people out there because they save money on premiums and they know that when something happens, it's going to get taken care of. The insurance commissioner has to be involved because it is related to insurance. There would have to be, adjusters come out and all that stuff. But I've run this past a member of the legislature. He likes it. So we're wanting to bring this up and make this a big item for the November election. And maybe next year we'll have a legislature that'll put this into use.
I said that was the last question, but one more.
Okay.
Is there a question you wish I had asked?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not sure about the question, but I have another answer.
Okay.
So it wouldn't matter what question you ask. This is the answer I want to give. For the last 20 years, there's been a systemic move in our state government to have it run by less and less of the people's legislature and more to the benefit of corporate Oklahoma and corporate America. When if you were paying attention in March, I know all of you were because we had the teachers walk. And everybody, I have friends in the industry. I'm one of the few Democrats in the oil and gas industry. Percentage-wise, there's a lot of us, but there's not many where I work. I do a lot of work in North Texas and Eastern Oklahoma, and most of the people I report to are Republican. So they're saying all these teachers just walked off their jobs. They should be fired. I said, no, they didn't walk off their jobs. They just went and did their job in Oklahoma City. They were teaching a lesson that week. If you remember, the teachers were sitting up there really pushing for themselves and the students to get this tax increase for the first time in a generation to help education. But you had one individual from Continental, the CEO, sitting up in that same gallery, trying to make eye contact with every one of the people he helped put in office, trying to get them to protect his 2.2% gross production tax. That's too much power for one individual in a state. I understand the need to do the best you can for your company. And these individuals who run these companies do a great job at taking care of their company. But they've gone too far when they try to own and operate their own state government. And that's what's been happening for the last 20 years. And that's why I'm running to help put a stop to that. And that's why a lot of Democrats are running this year.